Today, we're going to focus on looking at how to write engaging introduction paragraphs, which I am sure is a subject that you have addressed at some point in your academic careers. However, I think it warrants taking a closer look. So let's go ahead and get started. What are some of the common misconceptions regarding the intro paragraph? The first is that you must talk about everything that will be covered in the body paragraphs. When this happens, the intro paragraph ends up being overly cluttered with information, and it really makes it difficult to find the thesis statement or see the path to the thesis statement. Another misconception is you can jump into your opinion or thesis without providing background on the subject, so the exact opposite of the first. The third is no one really cares about what is presented in the introduction paragraph, especially not the reader. And the problem with this is that it makes for a very boring and disengaging intro paragraph. If you don't care, how do you expect your reader to care? You want to write an intro paragraph that you're excited about. And to do that, you should use a hook. So a misconception would be that you don't need a hook to get your reader interested. And the final one is just that your intro paragraph only focuses on introducing your essay's main points, which is something that we are taught when we first start to write to make sure that students have main points. But by the time you get to the high school or the college level, you really want to write an intro paragraph that moves beyond that, that is much more interesting for your reader. So here's an example of a poorly written intro paragraph. And I do want to clarify that I've never received a paragraph quite this bad from a student. I had to have it specially made for this lecture. I have had good and bad experiences with exercise. Sometimes when I do exercise, I get bad cramps. Once I thought that I would pass out because the cramps were so bad. Because of this, I have good and bad attitudes about going to the gym. I know there are things I can do to help me enjoy working out more, but for now I choose going to the movies over an hour of cardio any day. So why is this paragraph considered bad? I think we can all look at it and agree that it's definitely not engaging. One of the things that I do want to point out is that it is written clearly. There are not errors in grammar, and there are not errors in punctuation, but it's still a very not poorly written piece. So the first is that it's not engaging. There is nothing going on here. It really reads like the author was just going through the motions. It does not ease the reader into the subject. I would argue that we don't know what the subject is. If we even look at the thesis statement, but for now I choose going to the movies over an hour of cardio any day, that's not a good thesis statement. I wouldn't even call that or classify it as a thesis statement. It is repetitive, so the author is just circling around the same ideas over and over again. And that's another trap that students can fall into. There is no hook. And finally, it does not make me want to read further. So we're going to look at a technique that you can use that is devised to make your intro paragraphs much more engaging. And so this first technique is to focus your introduction paragraph around a vivid description or anecdote tying it to your essay's thesis. A man is at the helm of a chariot as he tries to control the two wild horses that pull it. As one horse sways to the right, the other sways toward the opposite direction. The man struggles to regulate the motions of the steeds, but once he gains the upper hand, and with the man in command, the chariot moves as smoothly as flowing water. To Plato, this is what the soul is composed of. The man is reason, and the steeds are the emotions and desires we experience within us. The only way man is elevated is when he lets reason govern his actions. But what happens when we let the other components of the soul take over? Plato puts forth an argument in Book 10 of the Republic, where he identifies the consequences of man neglecting the reasoning part of the soul by indulging in epic poetry. Similarly, on December 14th, 2012, Adam Lanza chose to do away with reason while he dove into his malicious desires when he took the lives of 20 children and 6 adults. Although thousands of years apart, there is a correlation between Lanza's fervent indulgence in violent media and people of Plato's time accepting the raw emotions glorified by the poets. Moreover, because of Lanza's disregard of reason, the events that happened in Newton, Connecticut support Plato's claim that indulging in our irrational nature has the power to harm. So this part that's in bold and red is the thesis statement. And as you can see, it's a very complex thesis, and it's a complex thesis that needs all of these aspects of the intro paragraph to lead to that thesis. So what has the author done here to get us to that thesis? The first thing that he's done is he's given us the anecdote of the charioteer, and that's a way of visually getting us engaged in an idea that he plans to then explain a little bit further. And so the next thing that he does is he ties it to Plato's tripartite theory of the soul and explains it even further. And once he's done that and explained where that comes from in terms of Plato's theories, he then goes to the story of Adam Lanza and what Adam Lanza himself did, which leads into the thesis statement. So you can see that there's a progression of ideas, but they're all necessary to get to that thesis statement. And there we have Plato's charioteer. So the second technique that we're going to look at is that for your intro paragraph, you should provide background and context for your reader with the assumption that your reader knows little about the concept in question. And this is especially useful if you are writing about literature or an article or a study, something that's related to a big piece that you want to then focus on and analyze further in your body paragraphs. So this sample is going to be tied to a book. So, inspired by the poetry of Walt Whitman, Michael Cunningham's Specimen Days is a trio of novellas that take place during the Industrial Revolution, post 9/11, and 100 years in the future. Even though each story takes place in different historical periods, the same three characters appear in each one: Lucas, Catherine, and Simon, whose roles and personalities change along with each storyline. The character of Simon in particular illustrates the greatest evolution throughout the book, as he first exists as a type of ghost within a machine, then is presented as a distant and aloof boyfriend who collects the curious and exotic, then finally as a biomechanical man who oddly transforms into the most human of the three iterations. In Cunningham's characterization of Simon, the exploration of what it means to be human, in terms of choice, values, and emotions, is most realized, thus presenting the implied argument that to be human is to understand how precious life truly is. And so again, we have the thesis statement in bold and red, and we see how all of these parts are used to narrow the focus down to get us to that argument about the character of Simon. So what has the author done to get us to that thesis statement? He starts with a general discussion of what the book is and gives us context so we can understand what Michael Cunningham was doing in Specimen Days and the premise of the three characters, that you would see their character arc in each different story. And then the intro paragraph narrows the focus so that we can just look at the character of Simon and what we know about Simon, which leads into the thesis statement, which is the argument about the characterization of Simon. So the final thoughts that I have for you in relation to writing introduction paragraphs are the following. You need to be specific with your ideas and with your reference. You can start broad, but broad does not mean vague. You want to be specific. Think about how your sentences connect to each other and prepare your reader for your thesis. Use transitions to link those ideas. Those transitions are key because then we see why these two ideas are relevant to one another. And then know where you plan to end. In other words, know the argument you will present with your thesis. I hope this lecture was helpful.